The morning was calm. The ocean was quiet. American sailors were still asleep. Then the sky began to scream. At 7:55 a.m., without warning, the first bombs fell from the clouds over Pearl Harbor. In minutes, battleships burned. Men were trapped below decks, and the United States was pulled into a war it had tried desperately to avoid. December 7, 1941 did not begin as a day of war, but it ended as the day America changed forever. In the early hours of Sunday, December 7, 1941, Hawaii was peaceful. Pearl Harbor rested under a soft tropical sky. The sun rose slowly over Oahu. Palm trees stood still. The water in the harbor barely moved. It was just another quiet Sunday morning in America's Pacific territory. Most Americans on the islands were thinking about church, breakfast, or a day off. Sailors planned to sleep in. Some wrote letters home. Others cleaned decks or prepared for inspection. No one expected combat. Not here, not today. The United States was not at war. For more than 2 years, World War II had been tearing Europe and Asia apart. Nazi Germany had overrun much of Europe. Britain stood battered but unbroken. In Asia, Imperial Japan had invaded China and committed brutal acts that shocked the world. Still, America remained officially neutral. President Franklin D. Roosevelt knew the danger was growing. He had warned the nation. He had supported Britain with supplies and weapons. He had frozen Japanese assets. He had cut off oil shipments to Japan in response to its aggression in Asia. But the American people were divided. Many believed the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans would protect the country. Many remembered the bloodshed of World War I and wanted no part of another foreign war. America First was not just a slogan, it was a belief held by millions. Japan watched closely. By 1941, Japan's empire depended on oil, steel, and raw materials. Much of it came from the United States. When America cut off oil exports, Japanese leaders faced a choice: withdraw from China and Southeast Asia, or fight. They chose to fight. In Tokyo, Japan's military leaders believed war with the United States was inevitable. They knew America's industrial power was vast. They knew a long war would be dangerous, so they planned a bold move, a sudden strike, a crushing blow that would destroy the U.S. Pacific Fleet in one morning. The target was Pearl Harbor. The plan was approved by Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, commander of Japan's combined fleet. Yamamoto had studied in the United States. He understood American strength. He warned that Japan could only win if it struck fast and hard, then forced a quick peace. Behind closed doors, the plan moved forward. 6 Japanese aircraft carriers slipped into the North Pacific in late November 1941. They sailed in silence. Radios were turned off. They took a long northern route to avoid shipping lanes. On board were more than 400 aircraft, fighters, bombers, torpedo planes. Their orders were clear: destroy the American fleet at Pearl Harbor. Back in Hawaii, no one noticed. American intelligence had intercepted some Japanese communications, but the messages were coded. Analysts knew tensions were high. They suspected an attack was coming somewhere in the Pacific, but Pearl Harbor did not seem like the likely target. Many believed Japan would strike the Philippines, Guam, or British colonies in Southeast Asia. Pearl Harbor felt safe. On Saturday night, December 6th, sailors went into Honolulu. They drank, they danced, they watched movies. Others stayed on base, enjoying the quiet. Battleships were lined up neatly along Battleship Row. Aircraft were parked wingtip to wingtip on airfields, grouped closely to prevent sabotage. Ironically, the fear was internal sabotage, not air attack. Radar stations on Oahu were still new. Few operators were fully trained. On the morning of December 7th, 2 young soldiers at the Opana radar station saw something unusual. On their screen appeared a massive cluster of aircraft. It was larger than anything they had ever seen. The planes were approaching from the north. They reported it. The officer on duty believed it was a group of American B-17 bombers expected from the mainland. He told them not to worry. The radar station shut down. The warning was missed. At 7:40 a.m., Japanese aircraft began to reach Oahu. The pilots could see the island clearly. The weather was perfect. The harbor lay below them, calm and crowded with American ships. The attack was about to begin. At 7:55 a.m., the first wave struck. Japanese torpedo planes flew low over the water. Dive bombers screamed down from the sky. Fighters strafed airfields and ships. The sound of explosions shattered the morning calm. Sailors woke to fire and smoke. The battleship USS Arizona was hit by multiple bombs. One penetrated the forward magazine. At 8:06 a.m., a massive explosion ripped through the ship. The blast was so powerful it lifted the vessel out of the water. More than 1,100 men died on the Arizona in seconds. The harbor turned into chaos. The USS Oklahoma was struck by torpedoes and began to roll. Men scrambled across the deck. Some jumped into the oil-covered water. Within minutes, the ship capsized. Hundreds were trapped inside the overturned hull. On the USS West Virginia, torpedoes tore open the side of the ship. Fires broke out. Crew members fought desperately to save her. The USS California slowly sank at her berth. The USS Nevada attempted to escape the harbor. She got underway under heavy fire. Japanese pilots focused on her, fearing she might block the channel if sunk. Bombs rained down. Eventually, she was forced to beach herself to avoid sinking in the channel. At nearby airfields, American aircraft were destroyed on the ground. At Wheeler Field and Hickam Field, pilots ran through explosions trying to get airborne. A few managed to take off and fight back, but they were badly outnumbered. Most American anti-aircraft guns were not ready. Ammunition was locked away. Orders had to be given. Keys had to be found. Men fought back with rifles and machine guns when they could. The attack lasted less than 2 hours. 2 waves of Japanese aircraft struck Pearl Harbor. The second wave caused even more damage. By 9:45 a.m., it was over. The harbor was burning. Smoke rose into the sky. Oil fires spread across the water. Ships lay sunk or damaged. Bodies floated in the harbor. The sound of explosions faded, replaced by the cries of the wounded. More than 2,400 Americans were dead. More than nearly 1,200 more were wounded. 18 ships were sunk or heavily damaged. Nearly 200 aircraft were destroyed. And yet, some targets were missed. America's aircraft carriers were not in port that morning. They were at sea. Japanese planners had hoped to destroy them, but they were gone. Fuel storage facilities were untouched. Repair yards were still usable. Japan had struck a powerful blow, but it had not destroyed America's ability to fight. In Washington, D.C., the news arrived in fragments. At first, reports were confused. Explosions in Hawaii, planes attacking, casualties unknown. President Roosevelt was having lunch when he received the first call. As more information came in, the truth became clear. America had been attacked. Not declared war on, not warned, attacked. That same day, Japanese forces also struck the Philippines, Guam, and Wake Island, and British territories across the Pacific. It was a coordinated assault meant to seize control of Southeast Asia. But Pearl Harbor was different. Pearl Harbor was American soil. Across the mainland United States, radio interrupted regular programming. Newspapers rushed out extra editions. Families gathered around radios in silence. Disbelief turned into anger. Isolationism collapsed in a single morning. Young men lined up in recruitment offices. Congress prepared for war. The nation shifted from peace to total mobilization almost overnight. But in Hawaii, the day was not over. Rescue crews worked through smoke and fire. Sailors cut through steel to free trapped men. Some could hear knocking from inside overturned ships. They worked for days, but many were never saved. The harbor remained under martial law. Blackouts were enforced. Fear of a second attack hung in the air. No one knew if the Japanese would return. As night fell over Pearl Harbor, fire still burned. The water was thick with oil. The air smelled of smoke and death. And beneath the dark surface of the harbor, inside shattered ships, men were still alive, running out of air, waiting for rescue that might never come. Inside the dark holes of overturned ships, time was running out. In the USS Oklahoma, trapped sailors tapped on steel with wrenches and tools. Rescuers outside heard the sounds. They marked the hull. They drilled holes. They cut through metal inch by inch. Some men were pulled out alive days later. Many were not. On Ford Island and along Battleship Row, the work never stopped. Medical stations overflowed. Doctors and nurses worked without rest. Supplies ran low. Blood was everywhere. Burn victims filled every available space. Chapels became morgues. Identification was slow. Many bodies were burned beyond recognition. Dog tags were often the only way to name the dead. Families on the mainland would wait weeks for official word. Admiral Husband E. Kimmel, commander of the Pacific Fleet, walked through the wreckage. He had believed Pearl Harbor was secure. Now his fleet lay broken. General Walter Short, responsible for the Army's defense of Hawaii, faced the same reality. Both men would soon be relieved of command. In the hours after the attack, Hawaii was sealed off. Martial law was declared. Civilians were ordered indoors. The fear of invasion was real. No one knew how close Japanese forces might be, but the invasion never came. Japan's fleet turned back toward home. Their mission had been to cripple, not occupy. They believed America would now negotiate. They were wrong. On the morning of December 8, 1941, President Franklin D. Roosevelt addressed Congress. He sat in a wheelchair behind the podium. His voice was calm, controlled, and firm. Yesterday, December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. The chamber was silent. Roosevelt spoke of treachery, of broken negotiations, of an attack carried out while diplomats spoke of peace. He asked Congress to declare a state of war. There was no debate. Congress voted almost unanimously to declare war on Japan. Only one member voted against it. The United States was now fully in World War II. Within days, Germany and Italy declared war on the United States. America responded in kind. The conflict was no longer distant, it was global, and America was at the center of it. Across the country, factories shifted overnight. Car plants became tank plants. Shipyards expanded. Women entered the workforce in record numbers. Rationing began. Blackouts were practiced along the coasts. Millions enlisted. The attack on Pearl Harbor became a rallying cry. Remember Pearl Harbor appeared on posters, newspapers, and banners. It fueled determination. It hardened resolve. The shock turned into purpose. Back in Hawaii, the recovery continued. Salvage crews worked for months. Ships once thought lost were raised, repaired, and returned to service. The USS West Virginia would fight again. The USS California would sail again. Even the USS Nevada would return to battle. Only the USS Arizona remained where she sank. Her wreck became a tomb. More than 1,100 sailors were never recovered. The ship still leaks oil, drop by drop, decades later. Many call them the tears of the Arizona. The attack also changed America at home in darker ways. Fear spread quickly. Suspicion followed. Japanese Americans, many of them citizens, were viewed with distrust. In 1942, President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066. More than 120,000 Japanese Americans were forced from their homes. Families were sent to internment camps. Their crime was ancestry. Their loyalty was questioned without evidence. It would take decades for the nation to fully reckon with that injustice. As the war moved forward, the memory of Pearl Harbor stayed sharp. In the Pacific, the United States rebuilt its navy and struck back. At Midway, American forces turned the tide. Island by island, the war pushed west. The cost was enormous. The fighting was brutal. But December 7 remained the beginning. It was the moment America understood the price of unpreparedness, the moment isolation ended, the moment a nation accepted that the world's war was now its own. Years later, survivors would return to Pearl Harbor. They would stand quietly by the water. They would remember friends who never made it out. They would remember the sound of planes, the smell of smoke, the shock of that morning. They would remember how quickly life changed. Because on that calm Sunday morning in 1941, the ocean was quiet. Until it wasn't. And nothing in America would ever be the same again.